Hello, how are you?
Great! I loved reading. So, sorry, I just ran up the stairs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading your paper about Open Worm Initiative and this lab. It was awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's...
Yeah?
Which paper was that?
Just the one that's like the very first one about what lab is about, your vision for it and such.
Oh, yeah.
I had yet to read it. I was basically introduced to this one middle of graduate school, and I was just like, I have no time for life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it because alternative institutions can catch up to the demand to save people now, while the old institutions are catching up to the digital age. We're not ready.
Yeah, it's, I mentioned, actually, I need to update that because there seems to be a lot of activity on that front. There seem to be a lot of newer organizations coming online. So what I think I mentioned in the paper, the Ronin Institute has been around for a while. So that was I first checked that out maybe about 10 years ago, where they were recruiting people, and it's a bunch of independent scholars who join the institute, and they get an affiliation, and they have to give a talk to the group and everything. So that's that's the way they run things. And so I actually know a couple people from that institute, and I figured out that I wanted to do this, and I had a different set of goals in mind. So that's how I ended up starting this lab. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of room to innovate and to sort of, drive forward these alternative institutions.
I love these. It's really funny. Last year, I used a bunch of essentially alternative institutions because the criminal justice system has to catch up. Everything needs to catch up with the age of internet, and jurisdiction is an issue everywhere, right? And the alternative institutions you guys came up with, I also really like Ronin. That is super awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting how this is like the age of opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much that we have so much technology, and much of it is obscure, actually. It's just sad that so much of the world needs to work really hard just to catch up to, living. And there's all this research that could be done that otherwise is not, the demand is there, except the prestige may not be, or something similar to that, right? It's so crazy. All the market failures of life, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I see Jesse and Anusha are here. Welcome.
Hello, guys.
Good morning.
Hello. I have to add, I came in cheering exactly the phrase Bradly responded to. And that's how I started up the lab, or that's what led to this lab. So I don't know what was that.
... right? Oh, well, I was telling Angela. Angela read the vision paper for the lab this week, and I told her about I started out. I was originally thinking of becoming a Ronin Institute fellow. I don't know if you've heard of the Ronin Institute, but
vaguely.
Yeah, it's a bunch of independent scholars who have kind of there's this affiliation that they can join the institute. They get certain perks. They have to give a talk to the institute. I think they get some library resources and an affiliation, and so it's grown a lot in the last 10 years or so. And they've done they're going a lot farther down the road of being an institution. So, I mentioned that in the paper, and I told Angela that I need to sort of do another version of that because it's just become so outdated because there are other things going on. So I need to update it. even with respect to this institution, that we've made a lot of advances, and I want to keep current with that. So
Yeah, we're doing a lot, and I heard on the wayside that the Rowan Institute, you mentioned one of its sort of rejected taglines, like "Rowan, it's growing," but it didn't really take off.
yeah, no, you're not there. Oh, hi, Erin.
Oh, Erin, good you're here. Have you guys? Oh, you were like vaguely together last time, because I know there's a lot of overlap in some doing Erin and Angela. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I think they were at different times or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I left around the time she entered.
Okay.
Not sure.
So I had a question for.
Looks like that happened again.
She's gonna come back in. I had a question for Angela. I got your
anti-Erin presence, I guess.
Yeah. You sent me, or you sent Jesse a CV, so I was looking it over. And then I'm gonna put some information up on the website. I don't know if you have a personal website. If you want me to put that on we usually have like a page where we have affiliations and people affiliated with the lab. Did you want me to put links to a website or?
My website is kind of ADHD central, so I'm kind of embarrassed about it. But once I clean it up, I'm going to clean up my LinkedIn first, because I applied to something yesterday that required LinkedIn, and I'm just like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. After that, I will clean up both the LinkedIn and my personal website.
Okay.
Because it does exist, but it's not. It's for private viewing only.
Okay. Yeah, and then I'll put some information relative to your CV on the website. I don't know. Well, I mean, we usually have a little bit of information, not too much. So,
Yeah.
And then I also saw that you wrote for the Florida Alligator, the Independent Florida Alligator.
Good days.
Yeah.
Go Gators!
Yeah.
You're from UF?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
I went there. Yeah.
Holy crap! Go Gators!
Yeah.
Actually.
Wow. I know that from college football, but that's fine.
Yeah. It's ubiquitous on campus. I mean, it's a big football school. I mean, it's not just a big football school, but they do like that.
Yeah, my one of my best friends was an engineer who went there too.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, cool. I might know them. I was pretty active back in college.
Okay, I'll mention that later. I do want to say though, Angela, I sent him your resume link. However, you kind of said send him a picture from your profile stuff, and I realized I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So
It's okay. I can send. I only have one professional photo of me, which I'll send.
I think I'm going to take this moment though to vaguely share some of this stuff from Princeton Vision, if you don't mind, because those are some fun pictures. Okay, this really quick through down memory lane. Just because this is a great thing. This was at the end of our trip. My hair was tremendously bad. I just learned how to put it up, and except for the first, well, it's a little more than that. But this picture here, this is Anson. This is Angela. This is me, some guy. Anna is now her own, and it was 17 here, and she's now he just sold a startup with her sister.
Yeah.
About GTP3 based copy editing stuff. So she's an amazing person.
Yeah.
This is a picture of us in the car. I was driving all these people from the airport to Princeton Vision. So all these 3 A names in the car. Angela, Anthony, Fiona. So that was a little bit more.
AJ.
But I think that I don't think I have any other ones, but those are just some fun memories. And then of course, this picture, which has come up many times. Follow us there. But anyway, enough about that. But I just looked on Facebook and saw your stuff and that came up. So.
Well, that's good. Good times. So I guess we'll get started on. I don't know. Is Anusha planning on? Is she going to present today or not?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I'll let Anusha say.
Yeah, I was thinking I'll be more ready next week.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Anyone else? I'm going to start with the Slack review, but if anyone else had anything to say before we get started.
I'm not quite sure how I'm going to go about. I don't have anything significant to present today, but I have some news that I'm going to kind of talk about, and some even affects Anson. So that's good, but I'll save that in the updates section, I guess.
Yeah.
Not quite presentations, but
okay. Yeah. So hope everyone had a good week. I was actually. I'll cover this later. I was at the Emergent Interaction workshop last night. It was very late for North America. It was in my time zone, it was 11:30 to 3 in the morning, which is not really late. I mean, it's late for me, but it's not unheard of. So I it was a very good time. And I see that they already put a tweet out about it today, Dan Bennett. Just kind of showing it's just the tip of the iceberg, though. It was a very good workshop. I know that Jesse and Daniela and Anson are the co-authors with me on that submission. That's the allostasis machines paper. So I'll talk more about that in the updates. Let me share my screen, if I can. Okay. Well, that's not good. I can't seem to share my screen. Let me see if I can go out and come back in.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
We'll see. I think he's fine.
Huh. I can't share my screen here. So that might be a bit of a problem. I don't know why.
Should we all come back in? Or
I don't think that's going to help anything.
No.
Well, I mean, I can just go ahead and do it, and then people will watch the video after and see it's going to be asynchronous, but so there's nothing I can do about it right now. I tried to, let me see if I can, oh, wait a minute.
Are you in a different browser?
No, I got it. I was able to get it up. I think I was pressing the wrong button, actually. As I said, I was up late last night, so I'm going to... But I think I got it. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, good. I think, all right, good. So, sorry about that. So we'll start off with the Slack review. And I see that there's a new channel, and I know Jesse's going to talk about this later. It's Anson Project. So I assume there's something, and we'll talk about it later. I just want to go through the Slack first. So that's a new channel.
In part, that's simple. That's just not really going to be anything there for a little bit, but it's just I want a specific set of resources and discussion about what he's trying to do. So there's not going to be a whole bunch there right now, but
yeah.
Anson and I are kind of trying to wrangle together a bunch of papers and resources and ideas that are around these things, and we don't quite have anything yet to show, but there's a bunch of notes and notions that are kind of just unrefined right now, but to come in the future, I guess.
Yeah. Nothing new in bioevolution. I think this is something I renamed this week. So it was I can't remember the name of the channel before. It was I think Brain Networks and something else. I renamed this Brain Networks NetSci. And the reason I did this is because there's going to be a significant presence at NetSci, or Networks 2021, which is a conference on networks that's going to be coming up at the beginning of July. So I have with co-authors in the lab here in different groups. So in DevaWorm and not, I don't think anyone in this group, but well, maybe I guess Daniela and maybe Jesse if they're interested, or whoever's interested in joining some of these talks. Basically, a 3 talks and a poster I'll be doing for that. The one for DevaWorm is I sent Jesse and Daniela a note to review the slides if they want to add things to it. I know Daniela was particularly interested. So that's up. That's probably the farthest along. Then there's this submission to something called NetOpen, which is it's a satellite session on open science and networks. And so we're going to be profiling the orthogonal lab as sort of a case study in that. So that'll be a nice presentation. And then there's another presentation with respect to, or actually the presentation and the other presentation and the poster are also a DevaWorm thing. So it's very DevaWorm centric. But I thought that we can, if things come up during networks, the networks conference, they'll be put in this channel. And so I know some people are interested in networks and things having to do with networks. So that's something that you can learn about over the summer, because we'll be getting a lot of resources in that area. Okay. The networks conference is actually NetSci, which is sort of like complex networks, and they've combined with the Sunbelt Conference, which is largely social networks. And so they're coming together this year into one conference. And so there's going to be a lot of interesting topics, not just with respect, a lot of the network science literature revolves around social networks, some on on social media or studying social media, but others on other types of social networks. And then you have things like biological networks and other types of more exotic networks. So it's going to be really interesting. And then I think I put I put 2 of the abstracts in the channel. So this is the one for the NetSci submission. So this is Network Architectures for Growing Academic Open Source. And then this is the other one, which is on something called embryo networks. And this is something that is DevaWorm centric. So more on that later. And then also, the allostasis machines. Rashab is working on a new draft of that with maybe some reinforcement learning involved in it. So this channel can also be about other types of networks as well. Brain organoids channel, I don't think there's anything new there. Brainberg vehicles, this is a new one. So Jesse posted on this. So I guess there's this Papers with Code paper on the animal AI environment training. So this is one of these sort of things where you can train an agent, I guess with data, and you can play it. You can put it into a game setting. You want to say anything more about that, Jesse?
Not. I haven't really gotten into the paper much, but I'm really interested in checking out. I don't know if you could open a link quickly, just to kind of show it. I'm really interested in, number one, understanding Papers with Code more, and I'll allude to that a bit later, what they're doing and how they're doing it. But also, this paper in specific, I believe it's based in TensorFlow, and I want to, this week in particular, and everything in my life right now is overflowing from the brim, mostly in good ways. But this is an important part of what I wanted to do with some Cognition Futures stuff in the actual technical sense. I would like to create a bit more of a zoo or modeling of these things in, Ooh, I have an idea, actually, about something I'm going to write down.
Okay.
But basically, I think I would really like to find more papers and or code with codes about these things. And this came from doing a search on paper code for like cognition something or other. And I would like to suffice to say, there's a few things that I would like to be doing with papers like this in the future about going through them, kind of extracting the technical, how are they computationally simulating and modeling these things, okay, and then kind of taking what we get to apply to some other things we're looking at in the lab, an Ansys project and other things like that too. And obviously the things like agent-based modeling and agent environment interaction is like a pretty major theme here in general. So I'll leave it at that. But that's up there. Also, I think Krishna just joined.
Yeah. Hi, Krishna. How are you? Okay. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. Back to the Slack review. So we'll follow up on this. Actually, there's some things I wanted to mention with respect to the workshop there too. So then there's a call for involvement. Nothing new there. CGS group. So this is like I said, we also have these cultural evolution presentations coming up. I'll talk more about the deadlines later, just kind of enumerating them. But for now, I think Jesse and Erin were interested in this CGS presentation. And if you go to the Slack and open this up and just look at it and make notes if there's something you think is missing or unclear. I know there's a lot of stuff here and it's very thick with material. So I'm going to try to record that this week because the deadline is this coming Friday. Not only for this talk, but for the one on Cognition Futures as well. So we really got to push on that. This slideshow is long, but it's, I think, something we can get through. But again, leave notes if you have notes. And then maybe like around Wednesday or Thursday, we'll try to do the recording. I know it's not very much time left, but I think their deadline is like the 21st, and they extended it already. So I think they need time to like organize everything and get it up. And if you want to register for the conference, they do have registration that's open, and it's not for students. It's not that much money. I mean, it's probably under $100. So I mean, it's maybe a lot of money for some people, but it's it's not horribly expensive like the in-person conferences are. So, and so that'll be going out. And then let's see. So that's for that. Cognition, and I don't know if Erin. I think I invited Erin to this channel. So if Erin wants to, I think she should be able to join that channel. Cognition Futures. Had a couple things in here. We had the same animal AI environment. And then this robot navigation is hierarchical active inference. That's a paper. So this is if Jesse had free time for reading, this would be the thing that he would read. Yeah.
Not this week.
Okay. So this is just about navigation and spatial cognition. That's an area of research, by the way, that we don't talk a lot about, but it's definitely something that's central to my interests. So maybe that's something. And of course, in some of the Bradenberg vehicle stuff, we've talked about spatial cognition experiments. So that's an area that's open, an area of great interest that we should come back to. Collaborations, I guess we're not going to get that. Oh, that's an empty channel. Conference materials, nothing new there. Cybernetics. Oh, yes. Okay, so this week we did the workshop last night, but we also did the Chi conference this last week, and I was listening into it on different things. And I posted a bunch of YouTube videos and different channels that are the talks from the conference. So they have the conference talks up on YouTube. So I have a couple that I'm gonna point out in the channels here. This tweet though is not from the CHI conference, but this is Michael Nielsen, who had this blog post. He said, "Interesting case made against tight feedback loops." So there's this blog post on tight feedback loops being maybe bad for learning. It's, I think there's he says it's an obvious critique. He says, "Yes, I'm aware it's easy to criticize this essay, but instead of focusing on obvious critique, I think it's far more interesting to riff on and develop ways it's correct or near correct." So this is why doesn't fast, accurate feedback lead to better learning? And so the argument here is tight feedback loops are seductive because they give us the feeling of rapid improvement. This can be as addictive as any drug. And it's true that in the early stages of learning a craft, tight feedback loops do help us improve quickly. When we're getting the hang of things, we make major mistakes, so feedback helps us correct course. But after achieving proficiency in a field, tight feedback loops are useless. That's because initially the learning environment is gentle. The path is well traveled, there are easily accessible guides, and so forth. As we become proficient, the environment becomes harsher with noisier feedback. Improving is not as easy. As high levels of skill, further progression depends on self-learning, on discovering or inventing new practices and knowledge. As skill increases, the gap between optimizing for metrics and optimizing for mastery widens. We've talked about some of those topics. The reason I bring this up, by the way, is that in the workshop, they actually talked about this tight feedback, this first-order feedback. And so I think it's interesting that they're coming up with this here in this context. This is Ryan Louis, who's has a blog post on this here. So this isn't Michael Nielsen's idea, but the idea is that then I posted something on this thing called Biological Rube Goldberg Machines, which is a paper I put out about 10 years ago. And I think this is relevant to something Jesse posted on another channel about Rube Goldberg machines, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But there's this, and the second thing in this channel is this really interesting talk from Kai. We can send a man to the moon, but we can't control the temperature in our office. And this is about in an office space where women are often colder than men, and so there's a struggle for the control of the thermostat. And the idea is that there's individual differences in terms of body temperature, being hot or cold in a certain environment, and we haven't really accounted for that in a lot of our room level control of temperature through a thermostat. So, we think about this sort of cybernetic regulation of the temperature. It's a classic example of cybernetics. And it comes to find out that you have a lot of cases where that's really insufficient for living. And so that's interesting because that also came up during the workshop last night. So, but there are a couple other talks that I also found interesting at this at Kai. So this one is so there are two more here. This one is designing interactive transfer learning tools for ML non-experts. So this is about the sort of human-computer interaction aspect of machine learning. So this isn't just running machine learning algorithms. This is helping people understand or interact with the algorithm through these interfaces. And then there's this other talk, Tessera, discretizing data analysis workflows on a task level. So this is a bit more about data analysis, but still it's the same principle where you're trying to take the analysis process and break it down for people to interact with and understand. So those are more talks. Developmental AI. Those talks are about 10 to 15 minutes, by the way. So if you get into, if you find something, it shouldn't be that big of an investment in time. Just try to stick with it, and so. And I find this, to be really a good opportunity. Some of these virtual conferences to learn new things because, I haven't been to Kai in years, But there's a lot of really interesting stuff, even if it's not something you're studying. It really opens your mind to new things. So, so this is, yeah, that's nothing new there. This is, let's see, I think, oh, yeah, this is a publication that we already have sort of in our bibliography on the ANN BNN's paper, but we'll have to come back to the ANN BNN paper later. And then, okay, so that's nothing new there. Ethics, Tech, and Society. We'll probably have some things in here. Let's see. So I think, like following up from last week, Erin said that there's a cool idea to explore. And she proposes this idea. What environmental and human health aspects our choice of AI, ML, and quantum systems materials can have? Maybe someone like Jansara Ruth, designer. Oh, I don't know what that means, but I guess what environmental and human health impacts our choice for AI, ML, and quantum systems? You know, do you is that?
Yeah, I was thinking about, with like the actual hardware that we're choosing, and we're designing a lot of things right now for these, and sort of like if you look through, it kind of reminded me of the cultural evolutions paper and that sort of concept. Really, the decisions we're making today can sort of lock us into some things which we'd either have to address very cleverly in the future, but if we can really engineer these things ahead of time and be looking at, okay, so what are the implications? How are we going to get rid of our waste? What effect on human health? And I'm really fascinated by the implications for human health that a lot of our tech has. And then, we've seen, I think we've all probably, well, not all, I think that a lot of us have seen these papers that come out and say, wow, the carbon footprint of training an ML model, that type of thing. It's like 5 cars in their lifetimes would put out as much carbon as training this ML agent, etc. And, going back to things with using hydrocarbons for hundreds of years and what impact that's had, and our cancer rates, it's just really compelling to me, like what design we're going to be looking at right now for systems.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So that follows up on what we talked about last week about like contingencies and lock-in, and yeah, I think that's a good idea. It's a good thing to follow up on. And so our solutions are going to depend on how we use the tech today, right?
Exactly, yeah. Sorry, I muted myself.
That's okay. Yeah, so that's a good, so let's think more about that idea, and this is something, when we get an idea, we want to build on it, and eventually maybe we'll come up with a submission of your own, or something new in some new direction. And so then Jesse points something to Erin here. This sounds like something you'd be particularly interested in if you were doing algorithmic auditing. And so there's a reducing toxicity in language models. So there's this toxicity prevents us from safely deploying powerful pre-trained language models for real-world applications. To reduce toxicity in language models, we will delve into 3 aspects of the problem: training, dataset collection, toxic content detection, and model detoxification. And so then I think Erin responded, thank you, I'll look into this. So this is another idea. And this is, of course, making sure that the algorithm isn't generating a bunch of profanity or racist content as sort of a course. There was the old case of the Microsoft chatbot that was trained on social media, and it started to spit out racist conspiracy theories or something like that, as sort of learning it organically from the social media channels it was monitoring. So, this is the kind of thing that we want to, we have to start by thinking, I guess, at the root of the problem, which is how do we deploy the language model instead of trying to fix it later.
And just as a side lab manager, director, team, like ethics and society team stuff. Last week, prior to all the things that happened this week, I have started fleshing out some of the specific structure for. I think I said this to both Angela and Erin at different points, but I'm working on the actual sort of infrastructure for a lot of things in the group or in the team. And there is a small database of like I'm creating a Notion database, and it has that link in it, and it has I might have actually shown this recently. I forget if I did, or I might have tried to show this in the just a moment. I might have tried to show this in the oh yeah, like I'll really quickly if I can share my screen.
Okay, let me unshare my screen.
Yeah.
All right.
Actually, I can. I'll show this. I'll show this later, so we don't interrupt this.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right.
But the preview for it is like I'm creating some structure for stuff, and I think like Bradley said, and I'll talk about this more later. But it's good for people who are kind of just coming along and looking for products or developing stuff. It's good to share things like this because it might not seem like, oh, I'm just posting a link, but what does that lead to? But over time, if we collect them and kind of keep thinking about them, we kind of extract concepts and projects develop that way. So what I'm doing is trying to create a little bit of a database that can be kind of thematically just kind of collecting our ideas, and eventually they will turn into things. And I think most people have joined GitHub, which will be a nice way to manage some of that. But later on, after the Slack review, I'll mention a little bit more about the specifics of those things and where we might go with some of the ethics team stuff. So
Yeah.
just a pin in that for now.
Okay.
With what you were saying, I had a recollection. I did have some sort of group I was signing into. It might have been with some merchant or something through a university, but an IT team had set up something where there was a automatically generated password, and mine was a slur. And I remember calling up the team and saying, this is a really simple but crucial thing that you can sift through. And the IT managers gave an excuse. Oh yeah, and he tried to pacify me and calm me down and like, yes, let me just explain to you, like, it's just a dictionary we're just sourcing. And I was like, yes, that concept is understandable,
Yeah.
but this is really something that should have been managed. Like, and he was sort of just passing the buck and just saying, oh, this is just, we just use a dictionary and it just goes through and picks words. And I was like, it's not great to get a slur as your password.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
It's like, yeah, the companies, the PR department, if someone had said that, like, on the internet, like a person, they would, of course, have to do damage control, but for, like, a password, it's like, it can't be okay. Yeah. But, yeah, I think that's definitely, like, something, because, chatbots, of course, don't know what they're doing, unless you program it to, but, I mean, like, even if you're just learning organically, I mean, sometimes when people learn English, their first words of English that they learn are like swear words.
Right.
So it's like, and it's not like, anything like it's intentional. It's just kind of like maybe, I don't know. But it's definitely something, though, that like with chatbots we can, select against or make sure that we're not reinforcing toxicity.
Right, and to me it was just the point that they sort of had abandoned honestly, I've worked with kids that were like in middle school that would have thought through, oh yeah, we should go through and make sure this doesn't happen, because it's just you're looking at the human part of the design instead of saying, well, people just have to put up with this, and it's very like, it's sort of like not sanding off your woodwork. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so that's something, maybe we can follow up on. I want to go over some comments here in the chat. Where are we here? Let me share my screen again. Then I'll go over these comments. So, okay, Erin says, okay, we'll be happy to leave notes on CGS. And then cool at feedback loop paper, Rube Goldberg and applied to BioNeat. Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a couple of channels. Cool at temperature control paper. Yeah, I thought that was a really cool application of, or like a cool thing to think about, like, and there's a lot of stuff that, and there are some more videos from Kai that are interesting as well, so I'll go through those in a bit. And then Krishna says, deep learning in many situations is an overkill, which is true. People want to solve everything with deep learning, but you don't necessarily need it. In fact, you need a lot of data to do effective deep learning. Classical statistical methods can work nearly as good as deep learning methods in moderate to small data sets. So yeah, with smaller data sets, of course, we can go back to the classical statistics, although there are a lot of debates as to whether those statistical methods are appropriate. And we talked about this in the workshop last night, of course. Whether, say, for example, you want to apply an ANOVA to a data set, or if you want to apply like a time series analysis, or if you apply like a set of correlations, and you can make this error at any level at any size of data, whether those correlations are spurious or whether they have like, some structure to them, or what you're doing. Because in a lot of cases, there's some classic cases from machine learning where you have, you're pulling out correlations from the data that are either spurious or obvious. Like, people wear more shorts as the temperature rises. Okay, more people are wearing shorts as the temperature rises. That's obvious. Like, you think about it. Okay, that's not really that informative. On the other hand, you might have a correlation between two things that are ridiculous, like global mean temperature rise and like the number of blue cars on the road or something like that, and there really isn't a correlation between those things. I don't have the link, but there's a website where they go through these like spurious or ridiculous correlations, and they're like two things that are not maybe not related at all, but people have made correlations and made graphs, and they look pretty impressive. The sort of the trend lines and everything, until you realize that they're in context, that relationship is ridiculous. So, but in other cases, sometimes you can find things that you would never have thought of, and then you think about the correlation that you're getting, and you say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." But I think the important thing is that there's a sort of the step of like understanding whether something makes sense at a deeper causal level, or whether it's just a correlation or pulling out. So that was an aside, but in any case, so then this last post in Ethics, Society, and Tech, this is a Many Minds podcast. You may want to check that out. Then Monday, I got this other talk from Kai. This is an interesting paper on data cascades in high-stakes AI. So this is a paper that it was like a conference favorite, or it was like on track. I don't know if they won the conference paper of the year, but this is about what they call data cascades, and it's really interesting. The argument is that you have this pipeline. If you have like a ML pipeline, say, or an AI pipeline, and you're applying it to some problem, what they're finding is that oftentimes you'll use training data, but the training data is not handled by like a professional data scientist. Oftentimes it's handled by someone who's just scraping data, putting it into a model, and getting an answer. But the problem is that you can have, and even if you have a professional data scientist, you can have errors that are introduced at every step of the processing of the data and the application of the model that compound over those steps. And so you end up with these data cascades. So you end up with like imperfect data from some source, but you treat it as if it's a full data set that's really informative. And so you can have all these different, where sometimes you make an error during cleaning. So there are all these errors that compound, and this is what they call a data cascade, which means that you can have some error, in processing the data that propagates through the model. And they kind of consider all these kind of scenarios where you get this sort of what they kind of make the correspondence to technical debt, which is where a technical system has a lot of sort of baggage associated with error or with misapplication, or even with like bloated code. And so they make this analogy. It's really an interesting talk. I would watch it if I were you. And then there's some other. This one here is on using algorithms to predict human emotions through facial expressions, and that this maybe needs to be rethought because maybe they don't like. Paul Ekman is a big name in like micro expressions, so he came up with the idea of looking at faces and trying to find emotional cues in the faces. We do a lot of we have more muscles in our face than any other part of our body, like locally, and so we use those muscles to make different facial expressions. And it's been well known that we make a lot of communicative gestures with our facial muscles, and so Paul Ekman has used that to sort of pull out some cues, some micro expressions, things like that we make with our faces. And so he and other people are critiquing the algorithms that are like looking at facial states, facial configurations, and trying to predict some of these different these states of mind. And so this is an interesting read.
Yeah, Ekman was like one of the people that one of my first research experiences was about ineffective computing, and it was really on that subject, and it's a really, really fascinating thing, and it leads to a lot of really interesting questions about meaning and how you can digitally quantify that. And we were working on trying to understand things like about relationships between humans and how that affected their facial expressions and all those nonverbal cues. So there's a lot of it's a really fascinating area, and also it's a really interesting area to think about in terms of a lot of the stuff that we talk about in terms of both putting into digital context, and also maybe more specifically in that realm of things which virtual reality or digital life and that kind of experience reflects or is a realistic platform to study certain human dynamics. So that's a good paper to share. And there's a whole at some point I think there's going to be a huge resurgence of focus on AR and VR stuff in the lab. Yeah. I don't think it might not be until another season, but there's just a lot of stuff building up in the lab that's VR and AR related. And I even mentioned Rashab, who is not often in these meetings currently, but he often posts stuff, and I know he's working on some things about art and neuroscience and sort of this area and BCI related stuff as well. So there's a lot of things that are it's a really interesting subject area. And outside of effective computing, but the effective computing, emotional stuff, and the VR AR nexus is going to be a big thing in the future in the lab in general.
It's really frustrating and concerning when I hear that. I remember reading a lot of papers that were using micro expressions, and they use 4 separate ones, and they run all these psychological tests. And I remember walking through my university and seeing these great big presentation posters on the research, and then I would look through the research methods, and I remember being sort of startled because they were using a micro expression that had been proven could be used for multiple emotions, and that I've read research that shows that, human beings really do use, when you look at a grimace, that can be from pain, it could be from someone chastising themselves for something they enjoy, like, oh, you really shouldn't have. There are so many different ways that we use the same facial expression, and it can be so many different, even positive emotions can have that exact same expression, and it really concerns me when we think we're sort of training things again in a poor way, like, or poorly, we're not remembering the reality, and we're thinking we're using these very basic categories. Sorry, I'm really into that.
No,
here.
So, and I'll bring up a term that I mentioned in the CGS slides. It's polysemy. And so polysemy is where you have a symbol or an object that has multiple meanings. And so this can be cultural. So if you can go from culture to culture and see like that people maybe smile or they grimace for different reasons, they could be different meanings behind it. And then, of course, we can smile. Maybe we laugh because we're nervous. Maybe we laugh because something's funny. It's like, so even within people. Yeah. So, the key concept there is sort of like this polysemy. So it's like multiple meanings for the same thing. And you can think about when you look at like a painting, people interpret it differently. And it's sort of the same principle.
How do you spell that? Is that like semiotics?
Yeah. Polysemy. That's how you spell it. Yeah. And,
okay.
Yeah. And it's kind of an obscure word, but I use it a lot because I think it's a good term to think about these things. Yeah. So that's one thing. Let's see. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. Definitely, and that's why, like, there's a lot that goes into that.
Well, yeah, and it was interesting. Like, we're talking about, like, even research on like kids with autism and thinking like, oh, they don't get it, and it's like, no, they're actually being. Some of them might be being very perceptive of the fact that there are many reasons that someone has made that facial grimace or expression, and the fact that they're not instantly saying, oh, the person's happy. If we're using these in machine learning, it's like, we're doing it again. We're repeating the problem we've already had in psychology papers.
Yeah, and there's like there's a major issue that cuts across a lot of things, which is sort of the implementation divide. And as long as this explains, it's sort of black box problem in general, but like as long as this like tangentially explains the specific stuff we're looking at, it's useful. It doesn't it's just like the password thing. Well, we have a password generator, generate a password, and it doesn't. This harkens way back to what first turned me on to a lot of the things about ethics in society and critiquing technology from that lens was this concept of like, when you're a civil engineer, you get a ring, and you wear this ring all the time, and you sign your papers saying what I built is comfortable and will be sustainable for people to drive over and everything else, and like it will. What you're creating is inherently not going to be problematic for people to use. And there's not really much of what people call themselves software engineers now. Like, it's not really the same thing. There's no, even in an implicit sense of, hey, this is our code of duty, but also in an external sense, there's no real shared risk for it. So that's like one tangent. But then the other tangent to like effective computing stuff, and kind of what I was doing is, I found like what I did for my, again, like very simple research project was like trying to, I feel like in some ways the best, or well, maybe not best, but like there's really interesting facial recognition stuff right now that does box certain expressions. But also there are ways to sort of group sequences or like almost like meta and sort of trajectory. I just realized that one of my first research projects was actually trajectory based, and I didn't really know at the time. but it's about a sequence and trajectory of events and not categorizing, but like actually identifying, okay, this is a sequence of, this is like this is a period within which certain things are happening, and taking that period as a whole in human interaction may be a higher set of information rather than just like, here's a snapshot of an expression with no context, and how does that play out? So I think like that, I think some of the fruits of improving the science, if you will, with, some of this, is this really science or is it pseudoscience in the story? But like improving the actual science of things like this, I think really kind of pushes us to have a more, like the bigger picture is kind of about holistic sets of comprehension rather than all these really low-hanging fruits about, okay, here's an image, and what do we tag the image with? It's just like tagging stuff in a lot of ways right now, and it's like, that's cool, but and like this speaks to the problem of where's generalizability and where's learning across situations. We always really extremely build neural networks that are trained to do, is this match this set of tags or not, yes or no? That's like a lot of what it is, which is like matching tags and how do we adjust the weights to have this output that aligns with our tag matches and our labels or not. And I think there's a lot of innovation to be had there. That's also struggled up against not having the innovation and not having the responsibility and having success in a specific context, It makes sense because that would be the most easily accessible and implementable version of stuff. So, I digress.
Anusha has a really cool point in the chat where she says expressions in autism using eye tracking with kids. Expressions in autism using eye tracking kids with autism pay attention to different things in social scenes than normal people do. I read some of those too, and I read another paper or a review that was interesting that the siblings of people with autism might still have some genetic precursors for autism without actually developing enough of it themselves to be labeled that way. And they actually have been noticing that they have side eye, like they will turn and face the TV with their body, but their head will be cocked to the side and they'll be watching out of the corners of their eyes. But they're literally watching TV, and it's interesting. So there might be a way that their brains and their sensory systems are impacting the way that they interact with the data, and it might be impacting because their sensory systems might be changed.
There's no significant thing that I know of that incorporates any like quote unquote neurodiversity. It's all like probably the most. There's no real tailoring on that. I mean, I'm sure there's some, but like on mainstream stuff, I've not seen any. Check this box if you're having a very situation.
Well, I wonder if Anusha was pointing out that those kids might be picking up something that we normally do, but that we gloss over because we're so used to socially being trained a certain way that we just sort of forget to note those things. They might be picking up on things that...
I would just like to elaborate on the comment. I'm sorry, Erin, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Cool. Did she go? Okay.
Oh, she'll be back.
Okay, so, like, these studies, like, they use, like, this kind of, like, eye tracking device, and they kind of, like, track, like, where the person's eye movements are going, like, what they're focusing on, and that's, like, kind of, like, a marker of, like, attention or interest, because if you're looking at something for a longer time, that's, like, in psychology, that's, like, a measurement of interest, right? So, like, in a social scene, like, one example I can think of, it's like there were like several people like in the scene, and it looked like maybe it was kind of unclear what was going on. And so normal healthy individuals, they'll focus on things like the mouth, like around the mouth, to try to figure out what's going on. The mouth is a big one, and I think like the eyes. But like the kids with autism, like some of them will focus on things that like don't make sense to at least me. Like they'll focus on like the background or like a tree in the background or something like that. So some people actually have a hypothesis that people with autism don't really like to look at faces that much. That's also one hypothesis. Simon Baron-Cohen is a really awesome guy for this stuff.
Yeah, their sensory information systems are overloaded because of the way their brain might be orchestrated. Maybe they're looking at the background to get some relief because it's stationary or something like that. So that's just really interesting. That's got some cool ties to what we're talking about. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's a good discussion. Maybe we can discuss that more on one of the, I don't know which Slack channel, I can't remember. Well, probably the bio evolution, that would probably work. But anyways, I wanted to go through, I'm going to kind of go through more quickly here on some of these points, but I see that Krishna submitted his bias in AI paper this week. So congratulations. I actually didn't get a chance to look at it before he sent it off, but I have, I just was too busy this week, but thanks for submitting that, and we'll see what the results are on that. But I think Jesse wanted to say something.
Oh, I was just saying thanks for doing that.
So then, let's see. We have a number of things here. I think that's... Oh, this is... that was old.
Old stuff. Yeah.
We always have the events news, so if you want to check out the latest events, go there. Just trying to find some newer stuff here. I don't want to... There's been actually a lot of activity, I think, in some of these channels, so... let's see... let's go to the general channel. The general channel we have... I put some more... actually, Jesse put up an Lab Manager update. So this is on his YouTube channel, and you can look at it here. This is just a lot of stuff on lab management, the different tools that are being used. So if you're interested in that, and that's something.
If you particularly wanted a deep dive of like what has been going on over the last couple of months, I did a big update on all of our tickets and things like that, the projects. And if you scroll up and see that chart, it's the sort of Gantt chart of roadmap of stuff. This is kind of where we're at. Like we have a bunch of things that are kind of hitting deadlines soon. Reminder, if you want to apply to Neurotech Academy, that's kind of happening. I have those 2 updates for my teams and everything else, but this is just like, I think this even needs to be updated now because there's more that's happening. This was all last Sunday, and there's been, plenty of stuff that's happened since then. So, yeah.
So that's that. And then Rashab posted an embodied cognition in HCIs. We did get something accepted to the IGSS workshops. This is something that was submitted a long time ago, and they were going to do something like in April, but then they postponed until June, and now we're getting accepted into this. So this is a 30-minute talk that we need to get out on the Metabrain Models stuff. So this is the Metabrain Models. This is the submission here.
I thought that this is the one that just disappeared for a long time, right?
Yeah.
I didn't... Okay, that's cool.
So
I was kind of surprised when it came up. That's awesome.
Yeah. So this is the submission. This is Jesse and myself on it. But if you want to join in on this, we can. You can contribute to it. It's going to be in the presentation at this point, but we might turn this into a preprint because people will probably be interested in reading it. It looks like they're going to have a good group here for the workshop. So this is about the Metabrain Models, which are, if you don't know what they are, this is where we take a series of different types of computational agent models and stack them on top of one another into levels that interact. So, you might have something like a representation-free model, like a neural network, and then stack on top of that like a symbolic model, or one of our CGS models, or have like a stack of 3 different models, maybe one that's representation free, maybe one that's representation rich, and then another one that is an intermediary. So there are a lot of different things you can do with this, and this presentation is going to lay out a lot of this for a general audience. So that's that. And then I wanted to finally, in the interest of time, go to the virtual reality Neurotech channel. And in this channel, I posted some more videos from Kai. So there were some really interesting topics, as I said. A lot of them ended up in this channel. And so there was this workshop on embodied interaction, which is about, like, you know, it's sort of embodiment. It's sort of something else. Let's see, I can't remember exactly how to describe it, but this is the framework. So this is embodied interaction design. This is using physiology, designing with respect to, like, sort of internal homeostasis and physiological states and things like that. They kind of walk through this framework. So this is for design and things like that. And this paper, I think, is a little bit longer version of it. They call it a chronobiology-friendly technology. So this is the example of embodied interaction that they give in this paper. So they actually talk about, chronobiology. So actually, I wrote a paper, human factors paper, like many years ago, on designing like something for like chronobiology. So I found this really interesting that people are still picking up on this theme. And this talks about kind of like designing a system that is in tune with your internal timing mechanisms, specifically your circadian rhythms and things like that. So, and then another thing, had some various research papers in here that are, interesting from the conference. This is something about designing with deep touch pressure, which is where you're applying pressure to the chest and it's supposed to change your emotional state or affective state. So your affective state is managed by the application of pressure, deep touch pressure, and there's a paper on it here if you're interested. So this, there are a lot of interesting directions for design there. This was a paper or a talk on articulating Soma experience using trajectories. I thought Jesse might be interested in the trajectories aspect of that. Then there were things on like VR design for 360 video. So where you create these videos where you can stand in the middle and rotate yourself around and see like the entire panorama around you. This is a new form of VR. It's really based on the old QuickTime movies that they used to have where they were 360. You can take a 360 view of your environment, but it's much more high resolution than that. So they talk about some of this. So that's just a sampling of what they had at the Kai conference. And again, like, I encourage you to... Angela had to leave. Thank you for attending, Angela. So that's from... And I spent a lot of time on the Slack review, but I think it was worth it. Now I'd like to move on to... let's see. I'd like to actually move on to the submissions document because I want to go over some things with respect to the deadlines that we have. So there are a lot of things that are always going on here. I want to be sure we're on top of it. So this emergent interaction workshop happened last night, and I'll talk more about it maybe next week. I haven't had time to process it yet. It was literally hours ago. So then we have this... some of these papers here, let's see, the next one that's relevant is the Metabrain Models overview is actually for this workshop that we were accepted at, and I can't remember where I have the actual workshop in here. It's listed somewhere in here. I don't know why it's not coming up, but that should be a match to the IGSS workshop, wherever that seems to be. I don't know where it is in this list. But I know I marked it off a long time ago. So it's some... Oh, here it is. So actually, this is the thing that I just mentioned. What can AI do for agent-based models? And so that's the theme of the workshop. And this is our Metabrain Models paper. So this is the one. This has been accepted. So now, I can't remember what the date of the event is. I think it's like June 9 through 11.
For the cultural evolution?
No, this is the different. This is the one, the IGSS workshop.
Oh, the Metabrain one?
Yeah, the one that I just talked about.
Okay.
So this one is the Metabrains. That's all right. So that's a new event date, and that's going to be tight. I think the Cultural Evolution conference is a bit. I don't know. I don't think it overlaps. But the Cultural Evolution stuff is due on the 21st, so next Friday. So we need to get that done, recorded, and sent in by next Friday. The conference is in June, I believe, and I don't know what the dates are. I don't think it overlaps with this event. But in terms of that, we have... let's see if I can find them. It's up here somewhere. Here it is. Number 24. So that is... Yeah, I don't have the date. Specific dates, but these are the talks. So here are the talks. Here's the CGS presentation. We have how many slides do we have in this? This is kind of like a grand tour of the idea, and every time I do these talks, I always learn more myself about what's going on here. So there's a lot of really interesting content here. It's maybe a little bit too far afield to really go into any detail on, but I think just to show it to people. And of course you can mention if you have, here's something on polysemy, by the way. If you have anything that might clarify it or any ideas about that, you can raise them here. And so there are a lot of slides here. This is technically a 12-minute long talk, but I think a lot of these things can just be gone over really quickly, and then maybe we'll even do a longer video on this later. But yeah, this is a good. I can, when it goes up on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see it in more detail. And then the second talk is charting the future of academic fields. I've prepared some slides for this based on the abstract. So it kind of goes through some of just basically the outline of the abstract. This is sort of a phylogeny of field evolution based on the timeline. So this is kind of like where things are branching off here and reticulating back into the so each one of these lines is like a concept that comes out of the literature, and then it either joins with another concept or branches off into a new concept. And so that's the idea. And then there are different inheritance models, and then this is the rest of the way I do this is just put the abstract in the slides and then just kind of draw off each part of it and draw slides out. And then I'm particularly interested in Jesse's feedback on this, whether he has questions about how it's presented or things to add in. I know he's got some ideas he wants to put in. I think we have room for at least a couple slides on maybe an overview of trajectories or something like that. It might help contextualize some of this. So I think maybe like something in this area here between 1 and 2 where we can kind of talk about the trajectory of academic fields and that stuff. And you had some in your presentation to the EI group. I think that might be useful here. And we can rework some of those slides, but we can put them in here.
Yeah, I had meant to do more this week with that, and I totally got blown out with stuff. So I'll be doing that this weekend and next week for sure. Okay,
yeah, no problem. So that's due this coming Friday too. So we have a lot to do on that. So that's good. We have all that in hand, I think. And then we have some deadlines coming up. So I don't think we put Krishna's submission on here at the end. We'll put Krishna's submission. I'll just make a note here to update it. And then I'll just make a note there. We can add that in. And it's been accepted, or it's not been accepted, it's been submitted. So we usually just put the deadline. The deadline was May. We'll just put May 14, and then whatever, we'll fill in all the details here. So this is bias in AI, actually. Okay. So that's we'll follow up. We'll be able to follow up on that. This is something that I just did. I'm doing this lightning talk on representationalism and modeling at Find Your Inner Modeler 4, which is a thing that I've attended. It's kind of semi-local. It's University of Illinois Chicago. They host this. They've hosted this NSF-sponsored conference on sort of bringing modelers and biologists together, and so that'll be something I'll be working on. And I think the event is in August, so we'll talk more about that later. This cognitive offloading thing is due June 1. This is developmental model of offloading. So this is something that I kind of came up with thinking about our interests in the group, and it's something that we should talk about more, especially with respect to affordances and offloading and things like that. This NetOpen 21, this is the submission in NetOpen 21. This is network architectures for growing academic open source. I mentioned that previously. It's basically going to use this lab and some of my other groups that I work with as a case study, and what the network structure of some of these academic spaces look like. Gibsonian information, that's to this International Society for the Study of Information. Now, I had a question on this from Jesse about what's due when. And my understanding is, and I don't know, but maybe I'm wrong on this, we'll find out, that there's an extended abstract due June 15th. And that's for submission for a paper and not a talk. And then September 30 is the short paper. So that's where you have to submit the whole paper. And this Gibsonian information paper, which we've worked on for the CogSci conference, that's the thing we would be submitting to this. It needs some updating and it needs some more development. So that's something that we'll be working on closer to that deadline. And that might be a good fit for it. We'll see. This EI workshop, follow-up stuff. So basically, the EI workshop that we did in, I think, March or April, I can't remember now. But we're following up by submitting something to one of their special issues. And there's the artificial life special issue, which is the deadline for the abstract is May 21st. I contacted the person who's in charge of that. They said, we just need an abstract and some names. So we have the abstract for the paper from the artificial life submission. We'll be kind of making that a little bit longer, I think, and then submitting that by the date. The Embodied Intelligence ebook, I might submit the same thing to both and see who's interested. Or we might do, I don't know, we might do something else for the Embodied Intelligence ebook. I'm not really sure. The ebook, I think, is more flexible in terms of the format. So I don't know if Jesse or someone else in the group is interested in putting something together for this. But there's an abstract due by the deadline, so the abstract doesn't need to be that long. It's just an expression of interest to contribute to it. But our deadlines are May 21st, so again, that's this coming Friday. So this week will be a lot of this sort of stuff.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. I'm trying to fit all this into the roadmap right now, the visual thing, to kind of give a little bit more sense of stuff. But there's a lot. So those are both due the 21st. You said.
Yeah.
So one was the ALAS special issue, and the other was what again?
The ALAS special issue, and there's this embodied intelligence ebook.
Oh yeah. I definitely want to kind of do something.
Yeah. So this is a little bit more flexible. I think this is for less developed ideas. So I think it's I don't think you can just write it anything you want, but there's more flexibility in this one. And again, it's just an abstract with interests and things like that.
Okay.
So I see Krishna had to leave. Thank you for attending, Krishna. Let's see. I think that's it for right now. This positive feedback in AI paper, I think this is the one that Krishna submitted here. So I'll fill that in later. And then I think that's it in terms of like coming deadlines. There's this Living Machines conference, but I can't think of anything that we'll want to submit there. I told my DevoWorm group about it, so they might be submitting something. But yeah, I think that's it for that. Okay, so that's the submissions. I just wanted to update everyone on that. Make sure that's in there. Okay.
Can I really quickly show my screen?
Yeah. Let me do this.
It's directly about this. I just want to
Okay.
If there's anything that's particularly missing here, is there anything that's particularly missing here on the Gantt chart? It looks pretty unwieldy right now. But,
yeah.
Okay. So just to kind of, I think you can see this, right?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. That's fine. So, these are going to go. Don't worry about these things. All this stuff.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But NetOpen, this is something we're doing, right?
Yeah, it's accepted and everything.
Okay.
The workshop itself is on June 30th, so there's a presentation that needs to be made, and then the workshop is June 30. So
I think the emergent interaction workshop stuff, we're not doing anything more with that. It's all over, right?
Yeah, it's over, but they might be following up on it. But I think for all intents and purposes, it's happened. So
okay, I'll remove that for the time being. These are still going on. Obviously, my stuff. I have to extend that out a week. I lost kind of a week of both of these things, but they're still there. This one, is there anything? Which was this for? The International Cognition Embodied.
Oh, this was the one. This is something run. I think it's actually in person in Japan. So I think we also missed the deadline on it. So, well, it's like 2 more days, but I can't think what we're going to do for that. So.
Okay. Neuromatch Academy, we know. I'm about to remove that. I don't think we're sending any directed to NeuroIPS this year. It's fine. These things, we just talked about, the ebook, the A-Life, these two things for Cultural Evolution Society.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything on here, and I put the Bicus thing here, the Metabrains, this will be fleshed out a bit more, but is there any, and I mentioned, just to kind of note your data privacy commerce idea, that might, I don't know where that should really be. But,
probably a little bit in the future, maybe over the summer. It's not really there yet, but
I'll put it up here for the time being. And this is the reinforcement learning competition, which I'm kind of curious about. So, is anything that should be on this?
I think that's it for now. Yeah, I think that's it. There's nothing else.
There's a bunch of stuff that's happening right now. Obviously.
Yeah. So it's there's this week is going to be a lot of deadlines being met. So, but that's the part that we were talking about here. So, I think that's good.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks for that update, Jesse. Okay. So now let's see. I wanted to. Was that?
I think Erin has returned.
Yes. Welcome back, Erin. So I guess does anyone have anything else they wanted to talk about in terms of updates or upcoming events? I know Jesse was reserving some update time for after the Slack review.
Oh, I thought it would be interesting to sort of look into sort of strategies for dealing with subterfuge and everything that just happened with the pipeline. I'm just sort of thinking about that in systems and security.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. Do you have any thoughts about that, anyone?
I don't have any specific project-oriented ideas, but I think that will be a major issue.
If you could hack something that's running somebody's heart or something there's just so many implications there. And the way that we deal with it, the psychological, tactical things that happen with dealing with criminality and best and worst intentions and like habituation, and the fact that someone even paid off the recent terrorists that did this, and they didn't even, like, they released the system and gave them some code for like working through it, but then their backup systems were able to handle it anyway. So like even paying them off was, I mean, it's always questionable and dubious, and they didn't rely on the solution.
This is like the new version, okay, of Wild West stagecoach highway robbery.
Yes.
Robbery. Like, what are you gonna do? Well, I don't know. You got me gunpoint. Here's some money. Like, okay. So anyway, yeah, I think there's a whole like. It'd be interesting to hear. I think Angela's gone, right? Like Angela is doing some things about alternate, ways to mitigate various problems and injustice and stuff like that, and is I don't know if you were here when she was rapping about the urgency of needing to keep up with new technology and stuff. So I feel like if we keep sticking around meeting, we'll find some stuff that can be fleshed out into projects, and that'll be a cool thing when that happens.
Cool.
So keep the ideas coming, and we'll see if we can crystallize them. Because there's things that can, like, these are sort of disparate topics in one sense, but at the same time, we could create some very cross-cutting, like, solutions or papers or proposals or like a set of things that might kind of be useful. And as a nudge to your potential future, Erin and I spoke a little bit about like being a consultant and the kind of projects that you might want to work on. So there's stuff to be applied and created in that sense. Definitely.
And if we could just avoid it, like, we've made so many strides as a society. If you look up, people have already done this work. Like, they've already looked at how to deal with criminality and how to deal with our internally, like, intrapersonally, inside yourself, how to deal with your worst impulses. And then also, like, as a society, how do we deal with the bad actor? And if we can just translate that to this field instead of having to have the same problems and then reinvent the wheel again,
Yeah.
I think it would save a lot of pain for people.
I think that's sort of like the big deal. Like, that's the deal about making things more digitized and in digital life in general with that. So.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful, it's a beautiful sort of, sorry, it's so early for me and I stayed up so late. It's such a beautiful way of looking at, like, the ortho lab, like, orthogonally situated, just like that sort of orientation, like bringing information from different areas, like cross-pollination, sort of like just, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything. I don't think you do the Anusha have anything to say or like present. I think we'll do the critical things more next week, the critical periods.
Jesse, could you pull up the medium and share your screen?
Yeah. That might be a good thing too. Let me get that.
I just wanted to update people.
All right. Here we go.
Yeah. So we have, and I don't know if Anusha and Erin are familiar with this, but we have a Medium blog, and if you could put the link in the chat as well, it'd be good. And so we do this. We try to update everyone on our activities. Some of this are calls for involvement. Some of them are meeting recaps. Some of them are like conferences that we go to. So this is I posted something recently, most recent post I made here, World Lab Manager Update for May 2021. I don't know if that's the title or not, but...
it might be this one here on the left.
Recap,
okay.
right. Oh, I did post on that. That was a call for Jesse's little presentation on the lab manager stuff. But this one is recap from recent Saturday morning NeuroSim. So this is going to that. So this is like, at one point we were doing every meeting and like kind of recapping everything. It kind of ran out of steam on that, but that's okay. I think a more effective way maybe is to go over some of the key conversations that we have in these talks. And so in YouTube, you can actually select a certain portion of the meeting and, queue it up so people can tune into a certain conversation. And so on this, we have a couple of conversations that we've had in the last several weeks. We had this conversation, for example, on animal cognition, the evolutionary development of the brain, cultural innovation, and gene culture coevolution. That's a mouthful, but basically, you can go to this link that sends you to the conversation segment, and then here are the references.
Which link would that be?
Just the name here with this, yeah. So that underline thing right there, just the whole thing, yeah.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
So,
I'll love that, yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So I think there are 4 things in there.
I see. You're kind of tagging the different components.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then if you go down, I think number 4 is actually Krishna. No, that was just cultural universals. I can't remember which one it is. Oh, that was the one. Rashab reviewed the Neurotech X conference. That's number 1.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, number 2, I think, is the one I just talked about. Number 3 is the discussion on evolution, brains, and behavior with parallels to computational agent development. Yeah. And then 4 is a discussion for and against cultural universals. So that was something we talked about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then 5 is, this is Krishna's talk about auditing black box predictive models, and I think that was last week. So we have all those in there. So I'd like to definitely do this on a regular basis.
Also, I would also think, one thing that you could do to get started, well, I'll finish, I don't want to interrupt what you were saying, but I have an idea about the meeting after this too.
Oh, go ahead. I'm done. Yeah.
One thing that we can do, and the medium is still a new thing, and because it's been super busy, I haven't done as much with it the last couple of weeks. But I would really encourage, for Anusha, for example, if you want to write up a couple paragraphs for a page or 2 pages on critical periods and put it on here, you totally could do that. If there's anything that you, Erin, see you want to write a critique or a paper or a position piece that's a blog, you can save meteor stuff or a manuscript or a presentation. But if you want to write a little something, and put it in one of, we have had things like that here too. And we also, there are ways to turn that. A medium publication is sort of a nice way to just express your ideas and get them out there. But then we have, connections and a lot of, if not connections, we know places to submit different blog posts or articles to elsewhere. That would be a kind of good way to, step it up in the writing and get more, more authorship and things like that. So the encouragement here is if you have ideas about something, you can present it at a lab meeting, and you're also welcome to write up something for the Medium post here about that topic as well. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. So we're looking. It doesn't have to be thousands of words. It's just something very brief, and it could be something like 300 or 400 words at most. And then maybe we'll put some images in, because typically that's the way blogging is most effective. Is if people aren't looking at a wall of text. You have short pieces of text with some images, and I can help you with that. That's not a problem. It's just getting the writing out is always the hardest part for anything. So if you write something, get engaged with it. That helps you move to other things like papers and presentations.
One of the most important things that I've taken away from my time in the lab is consistent presentation of your ideas and your thoughts. Just do it more. It's fun to talk, and it's great to talk here. That's awesome, and that we'll always do that. But and I haven't presented that much, interesting stuff lately. But get used to writing consistently and showing it. especially for getting in the hang of, for graduate school stuff, or you want to get used to whatever, like, come here and do that with this prepared thing. And that is like, it's very much like working out. Like, if you don't do it for a long time and you start it again, it's going to be rough and ugly. But if you've been doing it for a long time and you're used to it, it's not a big deal to just drop a monologue or discussion or lecture. And there's a space. I just wanted it to be clear. Like, I talk a lot, and Bradley talks a lot, and Krishna has been very good about presentations. Like, he'll present on an idea and do like 2 or 3 slides sometimes, but he'll get it out there. And I feel like that's just like, that's something that you have every expectation and ability to do, and just kind of saying, hey, if you want to do that in writing or on slides, there are means to do that, and it will really help you. It will really be good for everything. That's my thoughts for that. And I'm still sharing my screen apparently. Oh well. Whoops. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure, because I just touched a bunch of buttons. Yeah, so we don't have that much time left.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else people want to mention or present, I'll go over some updates from this week briefly.
Anusha says she'd be happy to write a few paragraphs. Yeah, so, if you just send that along. I don't know if you have a Medium account, but definitely you can send it along, and we can post it. I mean, the important thing is that you get it out there and you write it up.
Yeah, and for just in a career sense, like, it's very good to have things online that people can search that demonstrate knowledge and your ability to communicate them, particularly in like online or digital. Having a couple of blog posts on Medium is good. Having some articles that are like general audience related is really good. So like it's a skill that can be that will help you. Like it kind of seems like it's small and significant, but like it can be quite useful. So. That said, it's time for other updates and stuff, which is not an exciting title, but that's what it's about. I'm just going to jump into this. Hey, what's this? It's something colloquially, vernacularly, informally called the EA Hotel, which sounds a little maybe strange, but the Center for Enabling EA Learning and Research, sometimes called CELAR, but it's an opportunity in the UK, Blackpool, not Liverpool, but Blackpool, and you can go there and do research and get funded for it if it's generally vaguely aligned, and there's some seriousness to it, but with effective altruism. They're kind of the supporting group. But you can even go there and do a lot of self-directed research and things like that. You have to go through a little grant application process and talk about what you want to do, and there's a set of outputs that they do. This is not really the most, but there's some a lot of things that are kind of fall under the very broad umbrella of AI learning stuff. AI alignment, existential risk, animal welfare, and so on. Then where I'm going with this is that 2 people in the lab have been accepted at this. And I'm not sure exactly the details of it, but Anson, who most of us know in some form or another, has been accepted, and he very likely, I think he's like 99.9% going. And he couldn't be here this morning, but he wanted to say that he feels excited and happy to spend time in his research. And I think it'll be a tremendous experience for him to kind of get away from some stuff and some normal stuff, and having an opportunity for him to just focus on research and develop, I think, will be phenomenal for him. And that's awesome. I've also been accepted, and I'm pretty sure that I might go, maybe not as long as Anson, but I was accepted, and I pitched essentially, I don't know if I can easily show anything, but I kind of pitched some of my work on developmental AI and the Cognition Futures related mapping stuff in terms of how to help steer AI in maybe better directions, which is sort of aligned with their, how do we say this? Sort of aligned with their AI alignment stuff. It doesn't have to be like specifically targeted, but there's a lot of stuff here. And you can see like some of the past things that other people who have stayed there have done. So, and in some ways it's basically just a media. Here are some people who were there making it happen. I'm trying to find a example of stuff. Basically, it's a guest house, a converted old guest house where a lot of people who are nerds and researchers go and have some common shared workspace and some private rooms, and they're by a beach, and it's all this like really cool stuff. But it's been it looks like a great place to get away and just focus on your research for a while. So it would be really great for Anson. I think he's looking to move to go there later in June, and I think if he can do that, I think there's a huge chance that he'll be a little more active in the lab with that stability it will provide. So that'll be good. I'm undecided, but leaning towards it because I have other things that I need to tend to. But if I can do them there, I might do it for a bit. Why not? So that's what that is. Any questions about that or comments?
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. It's a really cool opportunity, and it's kind of designed for helping people. Yeah, I think Americans kind of have a 6 months limit to their stay in the UK right now, given everything.
Yeah.
But there's like a 1 to 2 year opportunity for those who. It can be involved with career transitions, or just like if you want to get some funding on things that are generally towards making a better future, and a place to just focus on your research and have a little bit of positive, like, shared workspace community, but mostly just like focus on your research for a while and not worry about food and housing costs. You get those mostly covered. It's a really cool opportunity, and it's kind of experimental and new, and it's not like you're staying at the Ritz 5-star hotel, but you have a lot of great things offered to you. So it's a great opportunity for people who need and want a space to just focus on their research. So
Yeah.
it's cool.
We were talking. I was talking about that with Angela earlier about like the different institutions that are emerging. There is this larger concept of a science hostel. Like a hostel is a place where people stay in like a strange city. They have they've had this in the past where you would maybe go to a place like Hawaii and there'd be like a house where you could stay and do think would host people for different lengths of time. But I'm glad that they're doing this where they're funding people, because that's one thing I don't have right now is funding for people. I wish I did, and I would definitely but it's like something that I think is good to have as a form of stability. And it helps you, I think, get more done if you have some stability in your life financially. So that's always been a big issue of trying to fund people. And I think that's a great opportunity for.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to, at some point, like I would love to have a specific discussion with Angela in particular, and other people here, but with Angela and you about like para-academic, alternative research capacities, because not only that, but also like there's some group many of well, Angela and I know a few people who have done like intentional housing. Like the science hustle sounds cool, but also people just gotten together. Like there's like group houses, like EA group houses, or like there's a few houses like in San Francisco that have like a number of people we mentioned in the lab in past, like really just great minds that are kind of working on a project and trying to live together and having that spirit of things, and that's cool. And it's a nice, if as a note to anybody here in our audience or like in the lab, like if you're looking to like work on a topic and be in a specific area, if you want to go to San Francisco or Boston or whatever, or the UK right now, reach out. Like we're really focused on connecting you with opportunities when we can. I'll go back to my screen and say one other thing.
Okay.
Quickly, state-of-the-art AI. Some of you may remember this group as somebody I found at NeuroIPS a long time ago and got extremely excited because what they're trying to do is sort of link specific researchers, a bunch of papers, AI models, AI concepts, and they're doing some new things with repos and libraries and everything else. And in so many words, like the evolution of model stuff is just like this is a lot of like trajectory stuff that I've been talking about, and I'll be saying a lot more about this in the future potentially. But suffice to say, I may be actually working with them to help develop some of their stuff. I've been in contact with the team, and I've had a number of conversations this week about that. So it's kind of a cool development. There'll be a little more details ahead of time. I will likely be working with some like strategic partnerships and outreach, maybe some community stuff, and helping grow and expand stuff. It's been really cool to see where they're at. They've done a lot of work on some facets of this platform, and they have some things that they're just developing and really wanting to do more with. And they're trying to help categorize some things and hashtag taxonomy, hashtag organization of stuff, and I most likely will be helping them in some capacity. I will be helping them in some capacity, but I'm a little bit guarded about talking about it right now. But it's been really cool because it's always fun when you kind of see a project and then it's similar to what you want to do. Let me see this actually. And then they hear about it and they find you or reach out to you. Like they had this, they had a big unveiling at NeuroIPS in December, and there's been some development since then. So stay tuned for that. There's some overlap between many of the things we're talking about here, and my affiliation with them is separate from the lab, but there's a lot of overlap with my own projects in general. So that'll kind of be sorted out in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something we could, synergize with in the future. Especially, I mean, I don't know how much, but of course and I also do a lot of community stuff. So we can actually open up a channel on that maybe, or discuss that more in the meetings, like explicitly how to go about building communities of collaborators. And there's a whole bunch of information about that out there. It's a whole field. So it's something we can talk about. I think it would be very, because I have had to learn it on my own, and there's not a class on that. So you have to really kind of, it's self-taught. So that's, yeah.
And I don't know if this is specific. I know this is the Rockwire stuff that you're doing, and I know there's like a Slack for that. But at some point, we'll talk about that, and even in the sense of like, there's a data privacy thing that we've been talking about, like that event that we're going to do. And that, like, one of the things that I'm looking to do with my role with state-of-the-art AI will be tailoring some of what they have to specific events. And I think that would, I used this analogy the other day of, if you're inviting someone over for dinner and you say, oh, what do you want? Or what do you have? You know, well, you just start listing off all these different, like, I have some mustard and maybe some chicken, or here's a can of beans, you know, and then I have some, some vegetables and fruits, you know, like, that's great. But if you can say, oh, well, I could make, a banana split for you, I could make a tuna wrap, I could make a big salad. You give them these actual, like, more tailored things, I think that can help. Yeah, because if you're just like, oh, it's nice that you have a can of beans, it's like, oh, but I'm going to make you a burrito. Like that difference between like accessibility and how do I engage this. The beans are the same, but the presentation is different. So that's one thing I think I'm going to be focusing on with them. And to that end, not only like generic crossover, but like I would like to help. I could see that event being a test run for some of my ideas about tailoring what they have there to an event.
Yeah.
And that would be a very cool overlap in many different ways. So.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of my interests is like imparting a lot of the community stuff to other people. And obviously this lab is sort of, I'd like to be able to help people, with this, develop kind of model so that people can, like, maybe develop their own, interests, but also develop events that can engage collaboration. So yeah, it's definitely something we can talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of
this.
Okay. But that's all of my stuff. I know we don't have much time with them.
Well, I wanted to go over a couple papers, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but if you'll indulge me for about maybe 15 minutes, I think we'll do a couple papers to finish up. And we can continue the discussion on all this. If Anusha or Erin have something to say, we can continue the discussion in Slack. I definitely welcome your comments. So papers for this week, we have a lot of, we talked about this tight feedback loops and learning.
Could you actually share the link now for this?
Oh, for the papers? Yeah. Let me go out here. This is the folder. And I'll clean it up in a little bit here. I usually have a lot of things in here, and then I move the stuff we don't cover to another folder, but that's, so this tight feedback loops and learning, we talked about this. This is the original tweet, and then there's some other paper. This is the blog post, the problem with fast, accurate data. So this is something that is sort of a thought piece, but actually we talked about this in the workshop yesterday or last night, and really the idea that you have these control systems or these cybernetic first order feedback loops that are sort of focused on a goal. So the idea is kind of where you want to go, kind of what's going on, but there's a lot in the environment that, say for example, if it's an uncertain environment, or if you don't necessarily know what your goal is, then these kind of systems can be problematic because they sort of lock you into this, you have a proximate goal and you're optimizing for that proximate goal, but there are other goals that exist out there. There's a whole world out there that you can't really deal with effectively. So this is a thing, if we build this kind of first order feedback loop that we usually think about as a basic sort of motif of cybernetics, this can be both good for understanding feedback, but also problematic for engaging with the larger world. And so that's I'm going to say more about that later. And then this other thing that I found, respect the unstable. And so this is an article by Gunter Stein. The practical, physical, and sometimes dangerous consequences of control must be respected, and the underlying principles must be clearly and well taught. So this is the punchline is that you can draw some contrasts if you consider the following mathematical statement, and this is a lot of control theory here. The sensitivity function of a feedback system must not only be finite in the right half plane, but it must pass through certain interpolation points. So that means, it just means that, you have this system that can be, plants is a term that they use in control theory. But it means that unstable systems are fundamentally and quantifiably more difficult to control than stable ones. So your system can be unstable or stable. It can be, very suited to linear feedback, or it might require nonlinear feedback. And so things can be locally stable but globally unstable. So there are a lot of systems, technical systems, socio-technical systems, and even biological systems. We're just merely observing how regulation works. And so we can actually learn from that. But there are a lot of things that we can learn from that we can apply to these kind of systems. So, and it gives us an idea of stability and instability and how that's dealt with. So it's an interesting article, but it's, this is kind of a lot of interesting little figures here. But this is something we can talk about in the future. With respect to the cybernetic project and feedback loops in general, and thinking about those sorts of things, and especially even ethics, where you assume tight feedback loops, and you assume that this is, you're optimizing something, but if you're optimizing, what are you optimizing for? It's not necessarily always that clear. There was another tweet by Blake Richards. He's a machine learning person, a deep learning person, AI, and he said, the more I think about it, the less I am convinced that humans and animals engage in really robust out-of-distribution generalization frequently. Learning a new language has really convinced me of this.
What is out-of-distribution?
Okay. So out-of-distribution means that, usually when we train a model, we focus on a distribution. So not only like a machine learning model, but a Bayesian prior, they're often considered to be some sort of distribution. And many times they're like Gaussian distributions, which are the normal distributions that we're all familiar with from statistics. But of course, there are other types of distributions, like exponential distributions. But in any case, we always think about in terms of the distribution. Things happen according to, say, some summary statistic, like a mean or a median, and then there's a distribution of events around that. Out of distribution generalization means that you can take some rare event, something that doesn't happen ever in the real world, or something that's quite implausible. Like if you had a 130-degree day in, Chicago, it doesn't happen that often that you have that sort of thing, but it could happen. And if you experience it, it's something that you would have to deal with and put it into your prior distribution table. So or if you had a out of distribution experience where, you saw something you never saw before. How would an agent deal with that? But how would a human deal with that? And so I think I'm not really sure that I think this is an issue that we can talk about more, and it really kind of interests me because I've been interested in this for a while myself. I haven't really thought of it in this way, but I think that this statement is actually maybe, I don't know how true it is, because I mean the way I think about it is that we engage in, there's an assumption that decision making is based on this sort of normal distribution where we think about things in terms of mean behaviors. We characterize things in the world in terms of their mean behavior, but that's maybe not the way we always reason. I think we often reason, as opposed to machines, we often reason in terms of out of distribution generalizations. We think about the exceptional all the time. We don't really put it in the context of the mean behavior, but we think about the exceptional all the time. We think about super people and super events. It's just the question is whether we can integrate it with the way we think about normal events. So like a huge flood, for example, we can imagine that and think about it. But can we synthesize it in the context of like the average behavior of rainfall? If that makes any sense. And I know that might not be very clear, but there's this area called mean field gain models. And I think that's maybe one direction this can go if you're going to think about it in terms of mathematics, where they're looking at flocking behaviors and they're looking at homogeneous flocking behaviors and the underpinnings of that. So I think I touched on this with respect to Ankit's work. Ankit was a member of the lab who was interested in collective behavior, and I think I've also talked about this in the Devorm ML lectures, where we had a lecture in game theory in that collection of lectures, and one of the things I touch on a little bit is the mean field game theory models. And so there's this whole set of models that deal with this sort of stuff, where they're looking at like games where you have this, you have homogeneous behaviors, heterogeneous behaviors that are collective, and you can model it using game theory. And I mean, that's one way forward in a mathematical sense, but I'm sure that we can think about this in other senses. We can think about this in a cultural evolution sense. So, for example, a lot of mythology is based on this out-of-distribution generalization. How do you characterize, like, some super event that happens in the world? Do you turn it into a myth, or do you integrate it into, like, the everyday? So there's a lot of mythology that operates a principle. You have, like...
Yeah, I want to do a tangent plug to this because, like, I think this is a really interesting related concept. It's funny because this is like, this obviously allusions to like nonlinear dynamics and dynamical systems and complexity and all that stuff here. And when I was doing some original stuff, I don't forget if it was the agent-based modeling course at Santa Fe Institute, which I didn't finish, or the nonlinear dynamics one, but the intro material for them both talked about the concept of the centralized mindset. And the centralized mindset is sort of fits into this by explaining some of how those out of distribution items may be categorized because there's such a deferment. Like the centralized mindset, for those who haven't heard of it, is sort of this concept that like there must be a leader bird that is telling all the other birds in the flock how to run. Like there must be this centralized figure, and sort of this inclination in the human mind to attribute some of its stuff to, maybe some top-down leadership stuff, and that obviously affects political stuff and social stuff. But there must be somebody who's controlling the weather. There must be a god for why the weather passes the way it does today. There must be someone. A specific figure that's dictating the economy's interactions, and the sort of inclination to filter and tag these things in that way, and how agent-based modeling and other sciences actually work to illuminate those things. So just a note for that because I think it's interesting.
Oh yeah, I think that's great. I mean, in my own work on modeling, I've come across something called leaderless behavior, which is a thing that was in vogue a little bit during the Occupy Wall Street protests years ago. But like this idea that you can have like group behaviors with no leader, and then you also have what they call leader-follower models, which are like where the leader does something and it constrains what the follower can do. And you play this game where it's like tic-tac-toe, where you start off with sort of like a certain behavior, and then all the other behaviors are contingent on that, and you end up with this, equilibrium between the leader and the follower. And the leader is determined by if they make the first move, not necessarily by any sort of like hierarchy. So, I mean, there are a lot of models that we can talk about with respect to that. I think it's interesting. I think following up on that, we might talk a little bit about this paper, Ergodicity in Economics. So this is just something I want to touch on a little bit. And I know that Danielle actually has a background in economics, which is maybe she'll be interested in this paper. It's called the Ergodicity Problem. And so one of the ergodicity is something that we use as an assumption in economics, and it basically has to do with this mean field behavior. So this is something that if you look at equilibrium statistical mechanics, this is something that they use quite frequently there, which assumes that you take a population of particles and you look at the mean behavior of the particles and how they behave over time. And this is transferred into economics. So you're taking it from a system of particles to a human system. And so this is the assumption that's been made over many years, over the decades and centuries of working on economic problems. So it's very easy to conceptualize in mathematical terms. But the problem is, of course, is this ergodicity isn't something necessarily that we observe in social systems. So as economics is a social system, you're dealing with things that are far from equilibrium, not necessarily something that is ergodic, which is this norm, this mean behavior, this norm based behavior. And so you're going to see a lot of things that aren't going to conform to this sort of model. So a lot of things in economics and in social systems are actually explicitly non-ergodic. And so this is something that they're facing here in this article. In this perspective, he argues that by carefully addressing the question of ergodicity, many puzzles besetting the current economic formalism are resolved in a natural and empirically testable way. And so he's arguing that, look, you're basically characterizing the systems wrong by using typical mathematical models in economics, and maybe something like an agent-based model or a dynamical systems model, which is going to be more suitable to characterize this, because it doesn't assume mean behavior, nor does it assume this sort of goal-directed behavior that you're making the assumption for. So you're maybe optimizing for a goal, in a dynamical system. You're not necessarily doing it. You're just observing the behavior, and it might be very non-normal in that sense. So that's that paper, and I don't want to go too far into this. Maybe I'll do one more paper. How's that? This is going to be a little bit different from the other papers, but this is something that I've had in the queue for a long time. And it's the first prior, from co-embodiment to co-homeostasis in early life. And this is a paper from a couple authors here that have done, they're fairly familiar, I don't know, philosophy and cognitive neuroscience. So, I mean, in that area, they're, that's what the audience are writing towards. So the abstract is that the idea of our ongoing perceptions, cognitive processes, and actions are influenced by prior events and experiences that recently received substantial support and attention from the people who are doing predictive processing and active inference. And we've talked about this in our AI groups. It's a predictive processing in particular is pretty popular in AI and in neuroscience. So in this view, the human brain actively predicts or anticipates what sensory input is coming next on the basis of prior inputs. So it's this Bayesian, first order feedback loop. You have a prior, you evaluate that prior, and then it feeds back to that original distribution. So it's a very tight loop. But of course, as we just talked about in a number of contexts, that tight loop isn't necessarily what you want. That's an assumption on our part. Now, the anticipation can be much broader than that, I think, but that's the basic idea. Where the reason we do this is because we're striving to reduce uncertainty and to survive within highly volatile environments. In this paper, they look at how perception, cognition, and actions get off the ground from the outset in utero. So this is a developmental approach. Indeed, one basic yet overlooked aspect of current PP and AIF approaches, which are active inference and predictive processing, is that brains and minds and human bodies first develop within another human body. Crucially, while not all humans will have the experience of being pregnant or carrying a baby, the experience of being carried and growing within another person is universal. So they define in utero development as a process of co-embodiment and co-homeostasis. and highlight their close relationship under an active inference approach. Contrary to the common view of the fetus being passively contained and solipsistically trapped in the solitude of the womb, we will present evidence speaking in favor of an active, precarious, and bidirectional co-regulation between two living bodies, what we will call co-homeostasis. We build upon previous work looking at homeostatic and allostatic bodily mechanisms operating already in early stages of development. So this thesis will lay the groundwork for introducing active inference of perceptual experiences. And so we conclude that these co-embodiment, co-homeostasis theses have many important implications on several critical questions about the nature of consciousness, minimal self-awareness, and social cognition. So this is really interesting. So they're arguing that you're dealing, basically one part of development is that there's this codependence with your mother, your parents, they talk about the mother specifically within another human body, and some animals lay eggs, which are outside the body, but they're inside of a shell, and so the question is that make this different? Is there a difference between animals that give live births and animals that don't? And so this is an interesting twist on development, especially with respect to predictive processing. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in this paper. They talk about Varela and Gibson. They kind of lay this out. If you have to get a little bit of background in predictive processing and active inference to really kind of appreciate what's going on here. But I think also it's pretty well written, so you can get an idea of what's going on. I think I like this idea of thinking about reproduction, especially. So in our developmental AI approach, we haven't really talked about reproduction too much, but it's sort of implicit in what we're doing. And I hope with this continual embodied learning paper, when we revise it, we'll focus a little bit more on the reproductive aspect of it. So I think that this is good stuff, and I think if you're interested in talking about this more, we should, because I think it's interesting, this coupling between two agents in terms of homeostasis, allostasis. We actually talked about this a bit at the workshop, and it's an interesting topic because we usually don't think about this too much. So let's see, let me check the chat here. So, I think, Erin left. Thank you for attending, Erin. So this is the decentralized, centralized mindset, leaderless behavior. This is the link that Jesse gave. And,
The link is to kind of a follow-up on the centralized mindset stuff, and I think one of the founders of that. But I'm really interested in that paper, and I just actually sent it to Anusha because I think that's going to be there's an extremely high percentage. I assume you're kind of delayed on the paper, hoping Anusha will be here and we can talk about it with him someone. But he will receive that paper, and I've been collecting some fodder and stuff because I think there's a lot that will happen along these lines this summer, particularly with Anson getting into the research. I know it's a little bit of the cool way to say it, but he basically got a research grant to do research, and I think doing that this summer will be huge for him.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, I just wanted to wrap up. I know Anusha has to go. Thank you for attending, Anusha. And I think I definitely want to hear more about this in the coming weeks, and I want to hear more about Anson. So have a good week, and we'll talk on Slack.
Okay, you have a lot coming up this week, so we'll be in touch with everything.